Thanks very much, Matt, for the introduction, and thanks to the Federation for inviting me to speak here today. It's an impressive crowd. This is a big room. You've managed to fill it, so it's great to get the opportunity to talk to so many people at once. As was said there, EIP stands for European Innovation Partnership, so it's bringing together farmers, scientists and experts to work together collaboratively to test new practices. So the aim is to road test new ideas and practices that can be adopted more widely by farmers to help achieve productivity, efficiency and sustainability objectives. In terms of the Farming for Water EIP, before I suppose the EIP was brought into place, the process that was followed was that LawPro would do their catchment assessment, identify what the significant pressures were on a particular water body, and then identify that pressure owner and send them a referral. So where agriculture was a significant pressure, they'd send a referral to ASAP, which is the Agricultural Sustainability Support and Advisory Programme. And ASAP is made up of advisors from Teagasc and then from the dairy processors. So there's about 50 advisors there at the moment. They go out, visit the farm, talk to the farmer, look at what the pressures are in the vulnerable areas of the farm, and do a farm-based assessment. And part of the recommendations then from that assessment would be identifying supplementary measures that could be put in place on farms. So these are measures that are over and above what needs to be done for compliance. But a review in 2022 identified that the implementation of those supplementary measures was hampered by lack of funding. They're supplementary measures, they're voluntary. You're obviously going to tackle compliance issues first, the things you absolutely have to do. So from that, the EIP came about. So it's a 60 million agri-environmental scheme for farmers, runs up to the end of 2027. 50 million of that is ring-fenced for payments to farmers for those supplementary measures I mentioned. There's funding, as mentioned earlier, through the EU and also the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, who are funding the operational side of the project. It's been managed by LawPro in partnership with both Teagasc and Dairy Industry Ireland. And it's that final step in the ASAP process, as Matt mentioned there earlier. We aim to engage 15,000 farmers, and it was launched earlier on this year at Loughnane in Mullingar, where similar measures that we're offering in the scheme have proven successful and have brought about improvements in the water quality in Loughnane. So the focus is on water quality, but we also look at co-benefits for biodiversity and climate actions. The bulk of the measures are nature-based solutions, so they have those co-benefits. In terms of eligibility to the scheme, we have a targeted approach, so it's very much in keeping with putting the right measure in the right place at the right time. Our top tier there is looking at restore, where water bodies need to improve, and we need to bring up the level of protection there. So it's initially looking at farms previously assessed by the ASAP advisors. They'll go back to areas where they've assessed previously, look at the measures that they recommended at that time, and if they haven't been taken up or new measures are required, they make an application on behalf of that farmer. The second tier then is another restore tier, so it's looking at areas in farms in third cycle PAs or in catchments with community-led water quality initiatives, so the likes of your group water schemes, and identified as the EPA or the local authority as areas that need those measures. The third tier then is looking at areas where protect is the function. So it might be an area that previously had a poor status, has improved, but there is still a risk there. So they're the more vulnerable areas. And then the fourth cycle is kind of a catch-all that has all other farms not included in the above. It's important, I suppose, to note that we don't have to fill Tier 1 before we can accept applications in Tier 2. And for our ASAP advisors, they will get through that Tier 1 tier very quickly, so they'll naturally move down to Tier 2 and Tier 3. So if you don't fall into Tier 1, that doesn't mean that you're not eligible for the scheme. In terms of the areas of the project that we want to focus on, we're providing localised information, so basically telling farmers what's happening in their local water body. They might be aware of the status of it, they might be aware of what's impacting on that. So providing that local information and then telling them about the measures that are required and why they're required. So what are they doing maybe that is causing an impact, and how is this measure going to address that issue? So you're not just saying, just do this, you're explaining, you're giving them the information that they need to look at the practices that they have in place. And there'll be training as part of that, so discussing what the significant pressure, what the losses are in their area, whether it's nitrates, whether it's phosphates, whether it's sediment, so that they are armed with best practice for making future decisions. Promotion is a part of it, and we have a dedicated comms lead, so it's highlighting success. I suppose in agriculture there's been a lot of focus on negative stories, so we want to just, I suppose, have the inverse of that and highlight where people are doing good work, because there's an awful lot of people doing an awful lot of work that isn't exactly visible. And then building on community-led local initiatives, so it is the likes of the group water schemes, tapping into existing networks where you have very proactive people who are engaging and who want to do good work around water quality. We obviously have the measures then, so recommending best practice measures and making sure they're targeted and in the right place. We'll be validating our measures through a research hub, which is made up of a number of different institutions, and they'll be designing projects around our measures. And then obviously there's knowledge transfer, there's a reporting part of the project that will inform policy. So I suppose the minimum entry requirement into the scheme is a rainwater management plan, and all a rainwater management plan is really looking at the scenario on the farm, where rainwater moves across the farm. The ASIP advisor comes out with the science background from LawPro, with those pollution impact potential maps that were mentioned earlier, and talks to the farmer. The farmer knows what happens on their land, and some of the information that the ASIP advisor comes out with might be outdated, or it might be there might be different scenarios at play, especially in light of, I suppose, the weather that we've had over the last 18 months. So they'll know exactly what's happening on their land, and together they'll be able to identify what the right measures are for the pressures that are there. So those measures are selected, plotted and included on the EIP application. And the measures are, I suppose, separated into the source control, pathway interceptor and receptor measures. So we have 43 measures. There's a lot on that slide. I don't expect you to read all of it. A lot of them will be very familiar to you. There'll be measures that you're recommending and implementing already. There is some more complex measures, but we'll be developing guidance around those and training around those. So, and then I mentioned the research hub. So we have the likes of UCD, UCC, ATU, Trinity and others. The ACP programme, all as part of that research hub. So they'll play a key part in the validation of the measures. And we'll be providing then internal monitoring and testing where we see gaps. So we've had an awful lot of collaboration with the agricultural industry. Dairy Industry Ireland are a partner. They're on our operational group and our strategic oversight committee. We're working with the sustainability leads of the dairy processors. They're developing and updating their sustainability action plans. So we're making sure that they align with what we're trying to do and that it's embedded into it. The dairy processors themselves, then I mentioned, are providing 30 advisors, and we're providing them with continuous support. And we're working with them to select those target water bodies to make sure we're putting the right measures in the right place. We also have had talks with Meat Industry Ireland, who would have a different relationship with their suppliers, but they're very interested in the project and they want to get involved. They have a much lower level of knowledge around water quality, but we'll be working with them to build that up and potentially bringing in advisors there to, I suppose, to bring in more applicants into the scheme. So where we are as a project at the moment, we have 43 measures, as I mentioned, covers all the agricultural pressures. We have a bespoke option, specification and guidance document developed. We've done a whole series of testing since the end of last year for the process nationwide, and also a concentrated pilot down in Kerry with Kerry Group. We have done a tillage pilot very recently just to look at the use of catch and cover crops, and we did a lot of that in the Castle Dockrell ACP catchment to bring in their monitoring there. We've established the research hub. In terms of the ASP advisors, we've put in training and supports for them. We've received applications for each of the 9 dairy processors in ASAP, and we've supported the selection of those water bodies where they can target and get a critical mass of farmers. So our next step then is to look at collaboration opportunities outside of that core ASAP work. And this slide was put together at the start of the project. It's a very busy slide, there's an awful lot on it, but it just shows the different sectors, the different bodies that feed into, I suppose, looking at water quality and have supported the project. So you have the dairy industry, Teagasc, beef industry, tillage, the community catchment partnerships, and the project team themselves. So we're looking at now maximising all those collaboration opportunities. So looking at the likes of the work being done with natural water retention measures, looking at nature-based solutions to manage runoff, fisheries enhancement, invasive species eradication and drinking water source protection. And that's where you can come in. So in terms of the process we have at the moment, I mentioned it earlier there, where LawPro do their referral and ASAP go out. And that's where the opportunity for the group water schemes to come in to fulfil that advisor role. So potential process then, from your perspective, you start at the top there with your group water scheme catchment or zone of contribution. Identify how agriculture is impacting the water course through an assessment process, and your integrated source protection plan aligns with that. Your group water scheme manager or the Federation source protection officers can identify those mitigation measures that are required. These measures then are recommended as part of an application that comes into us. So I keep mentioning application. So in terms of what an application actually contains, the rainwater management plan I mentioned, it's essentially 2 maps, one of the farm and one of the farmyard, and plots the risky areas where the water flows and what measures can be put in to combat the risks that are there. And then an application form which contains all the information about the applicant and everything we need to know on that, a consent piece, and then the measures you're applying for and the figures associated with that, and then obviously the documentation to be able to pay the farmer. So there's a bit in that, it's a new process, but we have a wide range of supports in place for our ASAP team and will be available to anybody who's making applications. So you'll be supported at every stage of the process. We have an advisory call weekly that's well attended, where you can bring up questions, and any changes we make to the scheme are done through there. We have application process workshops just to work through the mechanics with any of the teams that we have. When you send in an application, we give individual feedback, so it's not a case of get this perfect, send it in, or we'll reject it. That's not the way we work. Once we get the application in, we can work on it to make sure that it's to the quality required. We've given extensive measure-specific training. We work then, again, looking at the focus water bodies for, excuse me, for the co-ops. And we've given a wide range of supports to suppliers at supplier engagement events. So that's something that we would be very willing to do for anybody who's making applications. So in summary, this was key points: 50 million in funding to adopt water restoration and protection measures on agricultural land, supplementary measures. The majority of the measures are fully funded. It aligns with the requirement to develop an integrated source protection plan, and it's an avenue to fund EIP actions which are identified as mitigation actions within those plans. We have that wide range of supports that are available, so you'd be supported through the process. And it's important to state that we have a bespoke measure to encourage innovation. So we have flexibility. I outlined a process there that potentially suits some people. It might not necessarily suit everybody. So that bespoke measure is there. If you have a proposal outside of that, come and talk to us. Our position is that if we can make it work, we will make it work, so we'll work with you on that. And just with my LawPro hat on, I've seen that I have such a huge audience here. I said I'd mention the Community Water Development Fund. So the open call was launched last week, and it concerns grants between €5,000 and €50,000, with awards of up to 100% of the eligible costs, and it's for capital works. The portal is open from September the 18th, and the closing date is the 20th of November, so get your applications ready and get them in. And that's me finished. So thank you very much for your attention and your time.